Hey guys, welcome
Hey
to
there.
Ticket to Ride.
Hey, welcome, welcome.
Welcome back. Welcome home.
Yeah, welcome home, right?
What episode is this? I'm putting Paul on the spot. I know Paul doesn't
I
know.
don't know. We
Thaddeus
have to
It's
ask
knows
11.
though.
Thaddeus.
It's
He's the
11.
exec
It's episode
producer.
11, okay?
Episode
Episode
11.
11. Wow, look at that. We're just rolling along here, guys.
Well, this is a very critical weekend. Not critical. It's an important weekend. Critical sounds negative. But with the Memorial Weekend right here on the horizon, one of the most epic weekends in history for the movie theater, for movie theaters in general, and for audiences and for studios, I think we're going to have a much brighter, much more fun, much more stupendous box office Memorial Weekend than we did a year ago. It's a major bummer.
It's funny. I mean, we should get right into that, Paul, because that is probably the biggest story. Like, as we're there's a lot of storylines going on right now.
Yeah.
And I think, if you go back 6 weeks ago, the sky was falling, as it has numerous times since we started this podcast.
Pre-Minecraft, right?
Pre-Minecraft, it was
March.
all over, and movie theaters were going to be extinct by the time we get to August. Warner Brothers goes and contributes, what is it, $750 million of box office, and all of a sudden, Happy Days are here again. Final Destination goes out and does $50 million last weekend. Do you realize I didn't even, I started doing the research over the weekend. 25 years since the first installment of that franchise came out. And that grossed $27 million back in March of 2020. This one goes out and does $51 million. It almost doubled that. It is the highest grossing installment of the franchise to date. Unbelievable.
Who knew, Mike, that people getting killed in strange ways would be just as popular today as it was back in the day?
Right, definitely.
And I got to give Warner's a lot of credit, man. They took a little bit of a drubbing in that first quarter, but man, they've come back with a vengeance, a trifecta of Minecraft movies, Sinners, and now Final Destination Bloodlines that every studio should be celebrating, because think of all the people that were in theaters in April. And then, of course, we have to give credit to Disney as well with Thunderbolts being exposed to in-theater marketing and trailers for these upcoming films coming out Memorial Weekend, post-Memorial Weekend, and beyond. And wow, you're right, Mike. I mean, everybody was doom and gloom, and that will happen when you have a March that was down 46% versus March last year, but we had an April that was up 100% versus April last year. And I predict, if not the biggest Memorial Weekend of all time, which is a high bar, and we'll get to that number, but also one of the best lineup of films I've ever seen for the summer. But I think last May was pretty bad. And the Memorial Weekend of 24, we all know why, because the strikes and the resultant chaos of the release calendar, was the lowest grossing in decades. The 4-day period, according to our ComScore data, 132.3 million.
Right.
For 4 days for all films domestically, U.S. and Canada.
I'm willing to bet that one of the films opening this weekend will surpass that on its own.
Right.
I think you've stitched together quite a narrative there, Mike.
And the two blockbusters together will do better, possibly will do better than the entirety of the best Memorial Day in history. And that's just those two films. And then there's all these holdovers that are doing very, very well as well.
Holdovers are key. And I do have it in front of me, and I can give this to your team, Thaddeus, so we can put up this chart for those watching on video. But the biggest Memorial Weekend ever, a high bar, by the way, 2013, Fast and Furious 6 led a 4-day of $314.3 million. Wow.
I think that's going to be a tough bar to...
That's a tough bar.
However...
go ahead, Mike.
I think, in looking at the data, Paul, that you guys put together, if this is not the second best, it'll be top 3, top 4 of all time, which is saying a lot, considering Memorial Day weekend used to be, way back in the day, guys, the kickoff to summer, and then it kind of got moved back a little bit by, each year. I think we all saw Now it's literally the last week of April, first week of May is
That's
pretty
global
much where
warming. That's global warming, isn't it?
well, I
So
guess you could
summer
look at it
starts
that
earlier,
way,
right?
right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
But
good
that
and bad.
is, I like it. I like it.
I like that too.
But I think what that's all telling us is, we keep saying this over and over and over again. And I know, I've been accused of sounding like a homer for the industry on this, but what it really comes down to is it's truly about the content, guys.
Right.
And, we got into it a little bit on our last episode where we talked about, existing IP versus, the struggles that some of the non-existing IP has had. But when you look at something like Sinners, which is just cruising along right now, and, is the highest grossing, original IP, I think in 10 years, something along those lines. It's really amazing what they've been able to pull off with that.
It really is, and that's so important for the summer season because you need that momentum. And this year we had a Marvel movie to kick off the summer, which is always a good sign. And if you look back the last couple of years, we talked about 24 being 132.3 million for the 4-day Memorial Frame domestically. 23 was 205.
Right.
22 was 224 million. The top two movies this weekend will earn, well, if we do, let's say, Lilo and Stitch could do 140-ish for 4. And if Mission does 75, 80 or more for 4.
Yeah, you're looking at 220 right there
for those two movies.
Those two movies. And as we know, the holdovers are very strong right now. You're going to have a very strong holdover with Final Destination, which I think it's safe to say this isn't their final destination. My guess is you won't have to wait 13 years for the next installment of the franchise. But I think between Final Destination, between Sinners, between what's left in
Minecraft is still kicking butt.
You're looking at a very solid 4-day frame for all film.
Did you guys follow that Sinners had a sort of return run in IMAX last weekend?
Yeah,
right?
saw that.
And for the weekend, it did $930,000 or something in 9 locations, or $950,000 in 9 locations. That's $100,000 per venue in the weekend. And what week is Sinners in now? It's just
5.
amazing. Right.
It's amazing. Now, I want to ask you guys both. I want you to each answer this individually. So, we're fixated, not we, but just in general, there's a fixation on opening weekend gross. And Thunderbolts opened to 74.8, I believe, million domestically. And people are like, well, Avengers Endgame opened to 357, all this, back in 2019. But I think, and I'm already kind of answering my own question in a way, what's more important, big opening weekend or long-term playability? Mike, what say you?
I'm actually going to say it's very dependent on the film itself. Right. And there are certain films where it's all about a big weekend. Right. And, I mean, we've talked about this before too. There are those films that are, they're very commercial. They've got great marketability. They may be challenged when it comes to playability. And in those cases, Paul, I would say it's all about, get as much as you can that opening weekend. Right. It's not like a fine wine. It's not going to get any better. Right. However, there are those movies such as Minecraft, such as Sinners that we're seeing, which are what I would call, more of a marathon, less of a sprint. Right. They are and I know it's hard to say it with a $415 million movie that it's a sleeper, but in the case of Minecraft, no one had that on the bingo card doing $415 million. Right. And no one had it holding in the way it did. And no one had Sinners holding in the way it did. Right. So I don't think you can say, in my mind at least, that it's important that a film, has long playability. Every film is different and every film needs to be judged for what it is. I mean, if you look at something like Captain America, Brave New World, that's one where I think you could say it's a little disappointing that it did not have the legs that, right. a typical Marvel film might have. It opened big and it flamed out very
And
quickly.
Thunderbolts had a second weekend drop on par with the heyday of Marvel in the mid 50% range for second weekend. So Thaddeus, what do you
I
say
think
about
I'm
the
just going to sort of,
opening versus long term?
yeah, I mean, on the one hand, if you're the studio, it's just whatever the long-term number is, I would assume, right? Although you have to make decisions. Here I am, not a studio guy talking about what the studios think, but, you know, the studio has to make decisions about how to market the film, right? So you have to know what you have and how to approach what you have, which comes back to your point, Mike. But I think from the exhibitor's point of view, it's a symphony. You've got all kinds of different films going on at one point in time, and you want to have enough volume weekend to weekend. So if you've got a film that's holding well, then you hold on to it, and that contributes to the symphony, right? And then you
Yeah.
have big openers that might come and go in a flash, and you have to kind of have a variety of product in your Cineplex in order to be successful. So it depends on which of the two perspectives you're coming from,
And
I think.
I like what you said about a symphony because we're having a symphony right now, at least April, May, and going through the summer. Whereas we had last year, we had a cacophony, if you will, and that really kind of, I think, hurt the year. I mean, we really didn't get kickstarted into summer until June with Bad Boys Ride or Die last year, then Inside Out 2. But we were like making up for almost a first half of the year that was so disrupted. And this year, it just seems like, and Mark, let's face it, and Mike, we've talked about this for years, that it's the movie gods, right? Part of it is the movie gods smiling. Because if you go back to March, it was pretty bad. And there was some really good originals out there. Mickey 17, Black Bag, Novocaine. I mean, there's some, there was another one.
Drop was another one that
Yeah.
got great. I mean, but that's going to go back to, again, and it's the, everything is, there's pluses and minuses on everything, and is what it comes down to. And I think this goes back to the topic from the last time we got together, and that is marketing of original IP is extremely difficult right now. Breaking through the clutter and all of that noise is more difficult than ever. When you take existing IP, and you mentioned Lilo and Stitch this weekend coming up, Lilo and Stitch is probably one of the most beloved animated classics that Disney has in modern generation. I know a lot of kids grew up on that who are now young adults, who are adults and actually have kids of their own that they want to share that experience with. Not underestimating, but it doesn't have as big of a hurdle to get over because it's already like, I've already loved that. I want to go see it. Same way with Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible is a known commodity. When you get into something though, like Black Bag, like Mickey 17 Drop, you have to educate the audience to why is it that you should spend $12, $15 to come see this movie? And that becomes part of the big issue. And I think as an industry, and this goes back to what we were talking about, a few weeks ago, that's a nut we've got to figure out. And if we don't figure that out, that's going to lead to much bigger issues down the road.
And Last Breath was the other one that was well
Yes.
reviewed and all that. And then Sinners comes along. People we always talk about this, that big pronouncements are made about our industry during a sliver of time, like March, where those originals didn't connect. And then Sinners had a lot going for it. Ryan Coogler, Michael B. Jordan, great reviews. I mean, everything kind of came into play there. But yeah, I mean, that's what makes our industry so interesting and difficult to kind of put in a box because it's ever changing. But I got to say, I've been going out there a lot and just talking about this lineup of films. And we may have talked about this on our last podcast. The cadence, frequency, the excitement. I mean, I'm looking at I don't know, How to Train Your Dragon, the response that got at CinemaCon. That could be, I'm not going to say the biggest movie of the year, but it's...
Who knows, right?
Who knows?
It could be,
that movie's going to be huge.
That's another one where if you go back and if you look at the history of the franchise, and those are all animated movies, there's a ceiling on what those movies do.
Right.
It's very possible that this movie opens to what the total gross is for those films, which is, when it's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. And to your point, Paul, the lineup of films between now and the end of summer, and I know you always like to, you when we had the $4 billion summer, and you would equate that to how that was going to work out for end of year. Paul, if you don't know it, everyone, he is a mad scientist when it comes to the algorithms of how the world of the box office will work. But I had many discussions going into the spring with several distributors and exhibitors who were concerned that we would not get to $9 billion this year.
Right.
The topic now is trying to keep everybody tempered from from saying, "Wow, we can be at $10 billion." Like, slow down, guys. We're not there yet. So,
well, I will predict that we will get to over $4 billion this summer. I don't see, and especially with an August that looks killer. This isn't Leave It on the Floor August, or the Dog Days of August. When I look at the Naked Gun, Bad Guys 2, Freakier Friday, Weapons, Nobody 2, Caught Stealing, The Roses. What? Are you kidding me? It's fantastic. I mean, it's unreal. The punk rock month is back, because that's the month where we got Inglourious Bastards, District 9, Superbad, Guardians 1.
Right.
I just, from soup to nuts, man, from beginning to end, I don't know how to say it. And I'm not just, look, if the lineup sucked, well, I wouldn't say it sucked, but I wouldn't be saying it's one of the best ever. And I've talked to a lot of journalists and talking about, I think this is going to be one of the best summers ever. And they're like, it's going to be a record breaker? I go, I didn't say that.
Right.
I said it's going to be one of the best summers ever. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to break 4.76 billion like we did back in 2013. It just means that the currency of goodwill and the love of the movie theater and appreciation for the movie-going experience is going to be heightened and amplified, and finally put to bed this idea that the movie theater is not going to survive. There's challenges, of course, but let's just get off of that notion. So as Mike always says, it's always about the movies. It's about the product. I don't even like to call it product, but you know what I'm saying.
So I live in Boston. And every summer there are stories about the tourist industry on Cape Cod. It was a sunny summer. It was a rainy summer. It was a good tourist season. It was a bad tourist season, right? And it's a chronic media story every single summer. And when we're up, and when we're down, the whole industry is done forever. I think the movie industry is the same thing. There are good summers because there's good product or good weather, as the case may be, and there are bad summers.
Well, that's a great one,
It's just the way it works, right?
I'm stealing that from you, Thaddeus. I love that because
go.
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's as unpredictable as the weather, almost.
Well, I mean, and that's the one thing that is so unique about the movie business as opposed to almost any other industry when you roll out a product, and that is the audience is so fickle, and you can think you know what you're doing. You can put together what you think is the greatest package of, with actors and producers and everything. And at the end of the day, if the execution isn't there, everybody looks at it and goes, ho hum. And, a movie is also something that doesn't have this, if you roll out a box of cereal and for whatever reason the campaign doesn't work on the opening day, you can tweak the campaign and maybe you can get there. You don't get that luxury with a movie. If the movie is a crash and burn on Friday, it's yesterday's news by Sunday.
That's right.
It doesn't get that it's unique in that way. Conversely, Paul, talking about like that, movie that has the long legs.
Yeah.
If a movie comes out and it's a discovery and people love it, all of a sudden, it went from what was that to you've got to see this movie.
Well, do you think that could happen with F1? Because there's a lot of grumblings about F1, and I want to disabuse people of the idea that since, it comes on tracking lower than expected. This is a brand new IP. I mean, Brad Pitt is not brand new IP. Right. Joe Kosinski is not brand new IP. But traditionally, Formula One movies like Rush, Grand Prix, Le Mans, they have not done that well traditionally at the box office. To me, it's going to be a movie, whatever it opens to, once people go and see it, especially in IMAX or, the premium formats, it's going to build that buzz. I think.
It's got a lot going for it, right? I mean, that F1 has a lot going for it. It's got Brad Pitt.
They had the industry screenings of this last week, and we happened to have the Will Rogers Film Row golf tournament last Thursday, and the big talk was the F1 screening. And when I say the big talk, I don't mean the big talk of look out for that. It was more of like, That was absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
I did not hear one negative thing on that movie. I think that movie has a chance. Again, I'm going to put this in that it's hard to call a movie like that a sleeper, but I have a feeling we're going to look back on that at the end of summer going, wow, we didn't quite see that number coming from
And
this
it's
movie.
where
But
you
it could
wind
rack
up.
up a lot of good weekends over many weeks in a row in the way some of the
Absolutely.
films that we were talking about a
Well,
minute ago have.
Paul brought this up, and I've just pulled up the calendar, and let's talk a little bit about what we have coming up. We'll start with this weekend. We have Lilo and Stitch, we have Mission Impossible, and then our friends at Angel have The Last Rodeo. On May 30th, we get Karate Kid
By the
Legends.
way, I saw the trailer for Karate Kid Legends. It looks great. And we kind of think of, like, sorry to interrupt you, Mike, but I just want to jump in real quick. We kind of think of like Memorial Weekend's the last weekend of May. It's not. Post Memorial Weekend, you're going to have Karate Kid. And then after that, some really cool movies as well.
Well, then you get Ballerina on June 6th for the
Looks
world
great.
of John Wick.
Looks great.
Then you have Paul Dergabedian's How to Train Your Dragon on June 13th.
Right.
Don't forget the Phoenician scheme, Mike.
Did you direct that, Paul?
Yeah.
Did you direct
Yeah, I
that?
directed it.
Right. And I did. I jumped over the Phoenician scheme, which, is going to be a very interesting movie that a lot of people have their eyes on. But then you get to June 20th and you have Elio, and then you have 28 Years Later, which looks great.
Right.
And then you have on the 27th, we have F1, and then we have Megan 2.0. And I'm only hitting the what I would call
Hey, Mike,
the marquee ones here.
we have some really cool, like, Barbenheimer possibilities here.
Oh my God! No kidding. Huh?
Megan F1. I don't.
Yeah. Don't get me started on
Yeah.
that.
28
But,
Helios later. I don't know. It's kind of crazy out there.
Then there's this little movie on over July 4th called Jurassic World Rebirth.
Wow.
Then you have another little movie on the 11th called Super Baby. You may
Superman.
have heard of that. And then on the 18th, we have Smurfs and the reboot of I Know What You Did Last Summer. And then we get to July 25th, and then Marvel's, which looks like right now it's probably one of the most anticipated movies of
That
the
movie
summer.
looks so good.
Fantastic Four.
Definitely.
And so now that's just July. Then we get to August, which Paul was talking about. You have
Mike, wait, I got to play devil's advocate here. We have to keep it real.
Yeah.
Is there too much good stuff? Are any of these movies going to get hurt? Is it too much one after the next? Is it too much to expect audiences to go out every weekend, or will the marketplace expand to accommodate all these amazing
That
films?
is a really good question because this is, we saw a little of this right after the pandemic. If you guys remember, right when things kind of opened up again, there were all those movies that had been put on the shelf, and they were kind of lined up like planes waiting to land at an airport.
Yep.
And we went through that up until I believe Bullet Train was the last movie in that stretch in the first week of August, and then the pipeline dried up, if I remember correctly, and we had that just one monster after another. So your question, Paul, is very well founded because post-pandemic there really is no precedent as far as does the marketplace expand as it previously did. So
Right.
pre-pandemic, the marketplace would expand, and basically it would make room for all these movies. Now, the one thing we also know about the movie business is that while all of these things look great on paper, there are going to be one or two of these that don't live up to
That's right.
expectations.
Right.
So
right.
we know, and we also know there's going to be one or two of them that someone's going to go, where did that come from? You look at this calendar, and one of those could be, Neon has a horror film on the August 1st weekend called Together. Could that be this year's Longlegs? I don't know. You know what I mean? But, then we get into August, and then we have Naked Gun. We have Bad Guys 2. Then you have, Weapons and Freakier Friday from on the 8th, as well as Sketch. And then, now once you get into, toward the end of August, then you have Nobody 2. And remember, Nobody was a a pandemic hit. So the question really goes is, is there, to your point, Paul, does this keep rolling all the way through,
You
Well,
till
what would the
maybe
shortage be,
know,
right? There's enough seats at the movie theater. Maybe there's a little bit of a premium on the premium large format seats, but
right.
by and
That's
large,
the
there's
other
enough
thing,
seats
though.
at the movie theater. There's probably enough popcorn buckets to serve the popcorn, right?
Well, it's
So
good
it,
that AMC is doing that 50% off Wednesdays because
which
that'll
is
help.
another will drive attendance. Who knows what that will do to box office, but it'll certainly drive
But you,
attendance, right?
Thaddeus, you bring up a great point. How are all these films? Not all of them need or have to have premium screens, but there's a lot of them here that do. How is that going to play into? There's only a certain amount of shelf space, and you have to see Mission in IMAX or a big screen format. You have to see Superman like that. Many of these other films, F1 as well, and others, and Jurassic. How are they all going to? It may be an open-ended question, but how are they all going to get those screens that they need to get those premium format
I mean, it'll be
priced?
a struggle. There'll be a kind of conflict between the different studios, as well as the negotiations that the studios have with the exhibitors around which film is going to get those screens at
Yeah.
a given complex or across the whole circuit. I was just talking to an exhibitor the other day that has a pretty large footprint, and they'll say, well, I'll give you this complex for this title on my IMAX screen, and I'll give you this complex for this other title, and that's part of the negotiation. However, I think we all need to keep in mind that a lot of these exhibitors have upgraded their regular auditoriums in pretty significant ways,
Yes.
luxury amenities, recliner
Good point.
seats. So it's still a premium movie going experience, even if you're not in the
I mean,
IMAX
I
screen.
guess
well, I
it's a
mean, but
champagne problem to have. Like, how
look,
are we going to accommodate
it
all
is
these blockbusters?
yeah, it's a total first world problem to have. And a lot of it's going to be survival of the fittest as well. And that is, as you start going in and as you start seeing the ticket sales from one film to another is going to help to, make those decisions for the exhibitor. And you make a really good point there, Thaddeus, where overall the presentation in these screens is dramatically better than when I worked
Right.
in a movie theater way back when. The difference, though, is remember the PLF formats are getting $4 to $5 extra
Right.
per ticket.
Right.
That, as much as it's the experience that is important, on the business side, the dollars and cents matter. And getting that extra upcharge, could be the difference between a $50 million weekend and a $45 million weekend.
Or the last Mission Impossible and Oppenheimer, as the case may be, right? Because that was a case
Right.
that comes to mind where there was really contest over who was going to get the IMAX
Well,
screen,
and all you have to do is we just kind of went over real quick the summer. You have a stretch where you're going to have Superman, F1, and Jurassic World
Jurassic.
all vying for the
Right.
same premium formats in a very
I mean,
condensed window.
July is like, and then with Fantastic Four to round out July. So
Yeah.
that's going to be like the PLF month to end all PLF
Well,
months.
if you're an IMAX stockholder, it's going to be a good stretch for you.
So I want to
That's true.
I want to touch back on something that you sort of brought out, Paul, which is, what happens with sort of the studios or the industries, it's not just the studio, it's the exhibitor as well, ability to market all of these titles effectively. So so the consumer gets that in his or her head, that's the film that I want to see. Attendance, it's a sort of a dirty little secret within the industry, but attendance is down very significantly from what it was pre-pandemic still, even if the box office is inching up and inching up because the average ticket prices are increasing. So I think, and the screen count is also down, but it's not down that much. So there's a lot of capacity in these movie theaters as long as you can get the people to come to the theaters, right? There's lots of show times. The films are great, or they will be great. They are great. They will be great. So it comes back then to your point you've made several times, Mike, which is marketing. You've got to somehow get the message out to the audience to
Well,
get them to the theater.
again, when you're not wrong, and the attendance issue is definitely something that I think a lot of industry observers are very much aware and concerned of. And we keep going back to we have to grow the top of the funnel and we have to find ways to. And anyone who's ever heard me on this subject, I always say it's not even bringing people back. It's finding new people to
Right.
come to the
That's a great
movies
point.
and to show them that this is a great value proposition. And again, that's another key in my mind. And that is, whether you're spending 12, 13, 14, $15, that is a great value proposition for what you're getting compared to wherever else you could spend the money for.
You guys
So
want to talk about
argue
what
too-
AMC did this week in terms
Yeah,
of trying to drive
exactly.
attendance?
Yep. But I would argue too that, for people who have so many options at home on streaming, that's what raises the bar on what it takes to get people in the movie theater. I always say streaming and movie theaters are additive and complementary, not adversarial, but it just means the bar has been raised in terms of what it takes for someone to say, I've already paid for my month of whatever name the streaming service. I can just sit on my butt, watch a movie, pause it, go to the fridge, take a bathroom break, the convenience factor. But then you get a person going to see Mission Impossible and they'll be like, whoa, this is totally different. We need more people. And I don't know how you do that. I guess just through marketing and Mike, as you've said, through proper messaging, and then to get new people to go. But it's a very complicated, very competitive entertainment landscape. And the fact that movie theaters are doing as well as they did, I just wanted to say, just for point of reference, the Memorial Weekend of 2020, we all know when that was.
Right.
The total 4 days, $842,000.
Wow.
I think we're going to do better than that.
I think we're gonna do a little.
Well, I want to go back to one thing about marketing.
Yeah.
And this is something that caught my eye last week. I am fascinated with this organization called the Savannah Bananas. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. They are kind of the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball, and they have built the brand from nothing to. A week and a half ago, they sold out in Nashville, where the Titans play, and 81,000 people to come see this just baseball menagerie, so to speak. The interesting thing is when you listen to the guy who owns them, he's all about marketing, and he even calls his company Fans First. And it was really interesting hearing what he was saying, because he was saying he wanted to be a great value proposition. Goes back to that. And his ticket price, which is now around $30 a ticket, includes food and beverage when you go to the game. So he's not looking to nickel and dime. He's not looking to make it a laborious experience. He's looking to make it a fantastic experience that you want to repeat.
Take note, other people, of how to run your business.
That's kind of what I was thinking. I'm like, these. It sounds like common sense.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a way that, again, you can grow your funnel. And this guy is in 5 years has taken it to from nothing to it's now a major attraction on par with something like WWE.
We can apply those lessons to other places then.
That's my point.
In
And
a funny
clearly
way,
this
it reminds me of Angel Studios, because they came
Yeah.
from nowhere, and all of a sudden, they focused on the community that they were targeting, and the enjoyment of the community experience, right? So
Yeah. Well, clearly the Savannah Bananas are very appealing.
Ah!
You get comedy here on Ticket to Ride.
With that, Paul, I think that's our cue to call it a day.
Time to call it. I'm going to make like a banana and peel out of here. No, it's great to talk to you guys. Ticket to Ride pre-Memorial weekend edition. I know Thaddeus's team, who we need to give credit to, they do a great editing job for all the platforms, and we really appreciate it. So we look forward to this episode. I mean, for providing it to all of you, our dear viewers and listeners out there. Right, guys?
you bet people will be listening all the way to the Cineplex, right? On their way to the Cineplex. So
Hey, that's a great idea. I like that.
Love it. Love it.
All right, guys. I'm Paul Garabedian, Senior Media Analyst for ComScore. Thaddeus Bouchard, the head of Screen Dollars, and Mike Polydorus, the king of Paper Airplane Media.
Not the king, not the king, the top banana.
Oh,
there we go.
I love it. See? The comedy never stops.
It never stops
Ticket to
here.
Ride.
There you go.
Well, thank you, guys. Have a great Memorial weekend at the movies, for sure.
Thanks.
See you next time.
Bye-bye. Bye bye.
Bye, guys.